to a little good news. Well, we're 3 webisodes in and still don't know half of what we're doing, but we're learning, so that's good, right? I know the last 2 webisodes were geared toward humor, and most of the ones in the future will be as well. However, this week, I really wanted to talk about something I'm very proud of. You see, I come from a family who have served in the military. My paternal grandfather, Tom Fitzgerald, served in World War II. His brother John, who was in during the Korean War, was also in the Navy, as well as his brother Dick. His brother Chuck served in the Air Force. On my grandmother's side, my great uncles Ray and Roy, who happened to be twins, both served in World War II as well. My dad told me a story about one of them, and he couldn't remember which one. Got shot and thought he was bleeding, but it turned out that the bullet hit a can of rations he had in his pocket. The stories they remember. My father Michael served in Vietnam, and I don't know when or where he served because my father never spoke about it. And even though we may not have discussed it during the time that he was alive, it was most definitely a part of our lives. So our topic this week is our heroes. The dictionary defines a hero as a man of distinguished courage or ability, admired for his brave deeds and noble qualities, or a person who, in the opinion of others, has heroic qualities or has performed a heroic act or is regarded as a model or ideal. I'm really glad they changed that second part to person because, as we all know, heroism has no sex, it has no race, it has no political or religious boundaries. Being a hero is doing what others may not be willing to do or simply cannot do. I have been truly blessed in my life to be in a family where there are strong military ties, and I consider them all my heroes. My Uncle Dan, a retired Marine Master Sergeant, served 23 years in our beloved Corps. He was my first pen pal growing up. I loved getting letters from him when he was stationed in Hawaii and Guam. I was actually staying with him when my first husband Stephen was in Operation Desert Storm, and the storm was officially stated as over. I have cousins on both sides of my family who are currently serving. My cousin Chris is a Command Master Chief in the Navy, and my cousin Eric is in the Army and stationed on the East Coast. My brothers Tom and Sean both served in the Army, as well as my cousin Tyson, and my cousin Dawn, whose husband David retired from the Army not long ago. My father-in-law Thomas Fogarty served in the Army, and as the story goes, he was stationed with Elvis Presley and Jimmy Dean. Yep, the sausage guy, folks. This Veterans Day, I called our local senior center and asked to do an interview with some of the veterans. But when presented with the question of the interview, the veterans politely declined. It was really my fault. I should have been more specific as to what I wanted to ask them. It wasn't "what did you do" that I wanted to ask. Veterans live with their own memories and don't feel like sharing a lot of the time, and I can completely respect that. What I wanted to really know was how their experience affected their relationships back home. During World Wars I and II, Vietnam, and even Korea, all you could do to communicate was write back home. And sometimes there could be a major delay in the delivery of the letters. When my first husband Steve was in the Middle East, we wrote letters, but we were also able to record verbal letters on cassette tapes so we could hear one another's voices. Now, military members are able to Skype and email, and depending on where they are at, even text and call home on a regular basis. As is customary here on A Little Good News, I have pics. So I'd like to show you some pics of a few of the veterans I know and love. I've been a spouse of a veteran for a combined 25 years, but never served myself. Instead, I volunteered. I was a part of the Key Wives Club for the Marine Corps, in which we helped support each other when our spouses were deployed and did a lot of activities for the command. I'm very proud of my service to my husband's service, and I want to thank the families of veterans. Without the letters, care packages, and outpouring of love, I'm thinking it would be a lot lonelier. As our news segment for this week, I'd like to give a shout out to Frank Raccioppo. I really hope I pronounced that right because I've been practicing it all week. From Pasadena, Texas. Frank was featured on one of our local Houston television networks for his community service. After serving almost 30 years in the Marine Corps and the Army Reserves, Frank opened up a bakery. Yes, a bakery, folks, and called it Cookie Express. After 3 years, Frank is still working hard and making a difference as well. He offers kids a safe place to be and a little sweet on the side. Milkshakes are $1 and cookies are 50 cents a piece. Frank, we think you're one heck of an awesome guy, and I'll be going to Cookie Express to get some of those cookies real soon. Frank served in Vietnam, as did my father. Since my dad's passing last year, I've lived with a lot of questions. My father willed me his military medals, and through researching them with my son Garrett, there are a lot of things that I don't know. But what I do know, what I'm completely sure of, is that I'm very proud of my father. And here's a few pics of him.
The Eastern world, it is exploding, violence flaring, bullets loading. You're old enough to kill, but not for voting. You don't believe in war, but what's that gun you're toting?
My own experience with war was, as I said earlier, in the first Gulf War. My husband Steve was deployed for 8 months. We had guys camping out in our living room as the squadron got ready to go. Ashley and Jeff, I still remember you two, and I have pictures to boot. There are 2 things that I remember very clearly about that time. The moment I dropped my husband Steve off at the hangar at MCAS Tustin, when he was getting ready to leave, and the moment his group came home to MCAS El Toro. Imagine about 100 plus women and children standing behind a large fence and chanting, "Let them go!" until their CO finally released them.
You can reach me on an airplane. You can reach me with your mind. You can reach me by caravan. Cross the desert like an errand man. I don't care how you get here, just get here if you can.
I don't think those memories will ever fade, and they shouldn't. The happy, the sad, and the everything in between are what makes us who we are. Unfortunately, I've also been to military funerals. My grandfather's, my father's, and a very special friend of mine, Brian. I wanted to devote just a moment of time to him as the memory of our childhood runs fresh in my mind. Even now, Brian, we miss you. Now, I've saved my very favorite veterans until last. The first is our son Garrett. He's currently in the Texas National Guard, and if anyone thinks being in the National Guard is boring, think again. We love you, boy. And the last name is Benjamin Fogarty, and he happens to be my husband. Ben served 23 years in the Marine Corps and probably cringed when I mentioned I was going to show some pics of him. I will be nice, dear, and keep them to a minimum, I promise. I've included some pics of MCAS Tustin, which was Ben's favorite duty station. Unfortunately, it's now closed.
Woke up to the sound of pouring rain. The wind would whisper and I'd think of you. And all the tears you cry,
Aircraft Firefighting and Rescue, ARF, or Crash Crew as they called it, were the guys who saved the aircraft and their crews on the airfields. My first book, A Marine to Remember, was written because of Ben. That story is true. Not based on his life, really, but based on the idea of him being devoted to his job, his country, and especially to the woman he loves. I thank you, my love. Since the books were geared around aircraft firefighting and rescue, I tried to be as real as possible and even contacted some of the guys still serving just to make sure that I was getting it right. Some of the guys that actually worked with Ben, or at least in the same field, did read the books and felt they were pretty accurate. Thanks, guys. The series has been so much fun that I have a continuation of it releasing next year. All that aside, I guess I just wanted to say thank you to all the men and women who said the words and stood behind them. It's an honor to know you, an even bigger honor to call you friends, and for all of our veterans, know that someone is thinking of you and praying for you. If you want to help out, you can. There are some great veteran organizations. We've all heard of the VA, but a friend of ours, Dave Harrett, did some research and came up with two more that I'd like to point out. The first is Support Homeless Veterans, Inc., and they can be found on Facebook, and you can Google them. The second is the National Coalition for Homeless Veterans. As some of you may or may not know, the number of homeless veterans in our country is a staggering 50,000. Although our country has taken great actions to get that number down, it's still too much. Anytime I see a man or a woman wearing one of the hats that says veteran, I say thank you for their service, and I'll ask you to do the same. I'm proud of my family, grateful for my friends, and love the fact that there are still those who will sacrifice so the rest of us can do things like have a webcast or write romance novels. I wanted to end my show this week with showing you some pictures I've taken over the years during visits to Washington, D.C., and put them to one of my favorite songs. Have a great night, and thank you.